Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Political Fight Club. This is episode 2. I'm here with Ian Berg, my co-host, and we're going to go over a couple of things today. First and foremost, we're going to go over the Capitol riot / hillbilly parade, as I've been calling it. We're going to talk a little bit about the subsequent Twitter ban of Donald Trump after that. We're going to talk about the Boogaloo Boys and a little bit about cancel culture. And do we want to fight the class war or the culture war first is a discussion we're going to have there. We're going to talk about Wall Street. We're going to talk about SpaceX's Starship exploding on its landing. We're going to talk a little bit about Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos after that. Kyle Rittenhouse gone on $2 million bail. We're going to talk about COVID stimulus passing in the Senate, $1,400. And we're going to talk about Oregon decriminalizing all drugs and direct ballot initiatives. But first, let's go over the rules. Rule 1, talk about Fight Club. Rule 2, pick your battles, know your shit. Rule 3, know your opponent. Rule 4, keep the debate on topic. Rule 5, admit when you're wrong, guys, and that's a big one. Every time, I'm going to stress it. So last episode, when I was by myself, I went over a couple of things. Bernie on CNN and his adopting the verbiage that the neo-libs have been using with the 1,400 plus 600 equals 2,000. I talked about AOC and her sexual harassment and trauma in her past. And I talked a little bit about Biden's first 14 days. I'm going to hand it over to Ian. Let him talk about any of those things. If you have any takes you want to go at, please have at it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit the Bernie point first because I completely agree. I don't know why. So I love Bernie, big Bernie supporter. I like pretty much all his policy positions. Actually, a lot of times I think he doesn't go far enough to the left, but I still appreciate how long he's been fighting, how consistent he's been. But for the life of me, and I said this before on last show, it seems like the left has no teeth. I don't understand why he never uses the power that he has from being one of the most liked politicians and having all eyes on him to ever get anything done. He could hold up more things. He could fight to get more, and he doesn't. Which is strange because I know he believes in it. I know a lot of times people run on progressive ideas to get elected, and you're never quite sure if they really believe it or they just wanted to get that seat. But he's been fighting for it since the 1960s, 1950s. I mean, he's been going after the same stuff almost his entire adult life. So you know he's for it, and I just don't understand if he's grown to really like these people in Congress and in the Senate, and he views them as friends, so he doesn't want to strain a personal relationship. But I feel like maybe he's been in Washington, D.C. for so long that he forgets that there is an actual war where people are actually suffering, and every time he backs off and every time he caves in, we lose strength because he, whether he wants to be or not, is the leader of the progressive movement. And that's just how it is. And so I really do want Bernie to push harder, to get in the face of these other politicians, to stop worrying about making friends. I mean, he knows he's not going to be there forever.
Right. I think it's a little bit of naivety on his part. I think he really does in his heart of hearts think that Biden is going to do the right thing on some things. And I think he's naive there. I think Biden will do the bare minimum. But I think Bernie's also a fairly poor strategist. I think that he thinks that if he's nice to these people for long enough, that eventually they'll give him some things here or there, and he'll fight where he needs to fight and pick his battles. I think he just needs to wage all-out war and just go scorched earth. Because really what he's getting right now is nothing, and like I said in the last show, that makes him about useless because we have so much turmoil that needs addressing now. Any incremental stuff he's getting done is empty wins.
Right. Not to mention, the minimum wage increase of 20. It's going to be 15 by 2025.
Gross. We will talk about that later.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Medicare for all, people need that now. Millions lost their health coverage when they lost their jobs. Millions weren't even covered before they lost their jobs. And the ones that were covered still had high deductibles and high copays, and their insurance didn't want to cover things. So the system we had was broken then, and it's more important now more than ever. And Biden could give people health care right now.
Right, and Bernie is actually doing something good, a little bit sly. He's trying to get Medicare for COVID, which is a great idea. Because I see what he's trying to do, and I don't want to blow your stratagem here, Bernie, but basically I think he's trying to get Medicare for all for COVID because it is a pandemic, and it is the optics of that are great. That's an 80-20 issue if you frame it like that. And then once you give people Medicare for all, even when COVID's done, you're never going to get it back from them.
No.
So Bernie's clever here, and I don't think it'll work because I don't think they're that dumb to go, oh yeah, you know what, that makes sense. Let's do Medicare for all for COVID, and we'll just take it away and we'll reinstall the healthcare institutions privately right now back in afterwards. I don't think they're that dumb.
And let's be honest, we have a lot of Republicans in the Democratic Party.
Yeah,
so
for real.
Getting that 51 is difficult, even with slightly left-leaning things. When you go all left, then especially if the tiebreaker is Kamala Harris, she's never going to go in any direction other than what Biden wants because she's all about the optics. She's not a principled person.
And the optics are actually good with the Medicare for COVID because then it turns out if they do, like if Bernie were to write a bill and get it on the floor someplace, or if someone in the House were to do the same thing, framing it thusly, then you could get people on the record voting against healthcare during a pandemic that is only for the pandemic. And that would look horrible for anybody that voted against it. So I hope they keep doing that. That's clever. Framing is everything. And unless you have anything else on that,
that's
okay.
Just what I wanted to bring up. Basically, that I agree with you, and I want Bernie to fight harder. And then as far as the AOC thing goes, so I know anybody listening to this, if anybody listens to this in the future, 100 years from now, or 3,000 years from now, or tomorrow, we all know somebody that has been affected, or we personally have been affected by sexual assault. It happens way too often. And so I think a lot of people, I get where you can care for AOC and still want her to do the right thing. Totally agree. I can care that AOC was hurt before, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to push her to fight for things that the left wants. But anybody out here that is super callous about it or doesn't understand that being assaulted at a young age, or any time in your life, but specifically at a younger age, changes the entire wiring of your brain. It changes your behavior. It changes how you perceive things. And it can take a very long time to get over, and maybe you never get over it. Especially if you develop PTSD or learned helplessness, things of that nature. So anybody who's coming out being callous about it, saying get over it, or making jokes about it, nobody would do that if it happened to you. So I want you to put yourself in those shoes. I want you to think of a time where you felt helpless, even if it wasn't sexual in nature. And think about that every time you decide to be callous, or you say, oh, she's not fighting hard enough, so who cares that it happened to her. A tragedy is a tragedy. Whether it happens to a friend or an enemy, you can always show empathy to somebody else. And it's especially important in today's day and age where things are so divisive to show empathy to somebody who does not agree with you, simply because they're human. And sometimes that's the only merit you need.
Right, all right. I agree 100%. Yeah, and I divide it up. Obviously I'm going to attack her when she doesn't do the right things politically, but of course I'm not going to attack her personally. And of course I would never attack anybody or compare trauma with people, or try to make someone feel like their trauma is less than mine because of whatever they went through. I don't do that stuff. That's disgusting. So let's talk about the Capitol riot real quick. And the first thing I'd like to talk about is we have to talk a little bit about semantics and definitions for this one, because some people want to call it a coup. Some people want to call it an insurrection. Some people just want to call it a riot. And I think that does matter. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I have been framing it as a riot. I do believe that the intention of some of these people was probably a coup, but they're too dumb to have pulled it off. Now, that's not my defense. That's not my defense, because intention is everything.
Right.
And so I am, if it turned out that a whole bunch of, like, 10,000 hillbillies showed up and they attempted a coup, and they said they were attempting a coup, I think they should be charged as attempting a coup. But just the fact that they're too stupid to do it, which I saw this defense, like the fact that they're too stupid to pull it off is not a defense for a coup attempt. But I do not think that the overwhelming majority of people were there to do a coup. I think that they were more or less protesting. I think that it never would have happened had there been some sort of stimulus package. It was a lot of very angry, very poor people, probably too much alcohol and drugs in their system, that are lashing out because they just lost their president, or the guy that they idolize, and they don't know who to strike out at. And it is my opinion that they probably would not have had a problem. Maybe a couple hundred people show up. Had there been $2,000 stimulus checks, I think that's a group of very angry right-wing people who don't know in government how to get what they want, so they just go to the Capitol and throw a party.
I'm going to say, you're right in some aspects. Chiefly, they are very dumb. But no, that is not a defense. There have been people arrested for robbing 7-Elevens after they have straight up knocked themselves out in the midst of a robbery, and they didn't get off. They still got arrested.
And I'm not saying that any of them should get off. That's the thing.
Right,
I want to be clear.
So, but
I think they should be charged. Like, for instance, and I wanted to admit this on this show, one of the guys that was the insurrectionist he's my mom's cousin. So that makes him like, I don't know, like my uncle once removed or something. It's weird.
Second cousin. I
don't know how it is either, but it's my mom's cousin, and he is, because of how different the ages are of my grandma and this guy's dad, they were in the same family. It's like 20 years. He's my age, even though we're basically separate generations. So he's 34. He was caught taking pictures of himself and incriminating himself at the riot that was there, and he is now in custody. And
genius.
Yeah, he's a cult legend right now, a cult 80 IQ legend. So I wanted to bring that up. I actually know him, so a lot of the reason I started this show was because I want to clear my family's name. It's super embarrassing what this guy did, and I'm not going to bring up his name because I don't want this video to be taken down for me bringing it up right now. But I know this guy personally. I've met him 10 times. We've spent family reunions together.
Yep, I've seen his Facebook comments.
Right, and he went after me on my Facebook. Now, and he absolutely was there to, in his name, fight for Donald Trump, and if at all possible, keep him in power. Now, this guy is an idiot. Of course, there's no plan beyond that. It was like, I'm going to go there and cause ruckus and scare them into doing what I want to do.
Yes.
Now, that's a coup attempt, but it's the stupidest coup attempt of all time.
Well, let's also take a look at definitions.
Mm-hmm.
Using fear because of an ideology or to gain things politically is terrorism.
Right.
It's terrorism. I mean, I don't care how you feel about it. I don't care if they're bad terrorists. They were terrorists. So let's also, how I differ from you is I don't think that it would have mattered if they had checks. One, they came there to stop the certifying of electoral votes. They came there to stop the process of our representative republic. Now, granted, I absolutely abhor the Electoral College. It's dumb and it needs to go, but it's the way we do things legally. And there are a lot of laws in place that make sure whoever is in the Electoral College votes for the popular vote. So there's not really too much difference between the Electoral College and the popular vote. Either way, I think it's kind of dumb, but I digress.
But this was more or less symbolic, what they were doing, and it wouldn't have, even if they had stopped it, it wouldn't have stopped Joe Biden. So again, it's half-baked. Of course I do, that's why I've been calling it more or less like a riot. I think that the vast majority of people were there they were there to basically, to try to make the people that were there afraid, but I don't think they had any particular goal other than to just make them afraid, and other than that, I think that the vast majority of them were probably just there as protest.
Yeah, they
didn't actually break anything. They didn't, post pictures of themselves, or in my family member's account, he actually said put AOC's neck in a noose online, which is a ridiculous, dude. Like,
I think most of them were dogs chasing cars. I think a lot of them were just like the BLM riots, where they're like, people are smashing stuff and things are on fire. Why not?
Right, and I do want a lot of people to get prosecuted. There are some people, like, obviously that picture of that old lady who's like 90 years old. She didn't know where she is. So I think it's kind of funny. I've been calling it a hillbilly parade, and it's over with now, so I don't want to talk too much about it. But what's important is the subsequent Twitter ban of Trump, and that is a little bit important. So I'd like to take about 5 minutes here to talk about that. And what happened was, and you guys have all seen it, Trump's been banned from Twitter. And the First Amendment has now been spotlighted for about a week after that. It's now a little bit fallen behind, but we're a little behind here. So I'd like to talk about the blowback that the left is getting. Now that Trump has been banned on Twitter, a lot of lefty YouTube channels are being demonetized. A lot of Twitter accounts are getting banned. And it's all under the guise of, well, we can't allow hate speech. We can't allow things that might be riling up the masses to be on social media. I want to get your take on this.
Well, here's the thing. I think you and I are both in agreement that I think Trump's Twitter ban is basically his death sentence from the internet is overkill. Okay?
Agreed.
But legally, with how things are set up now, these companies are well within their rights. And on top of that, it's also not canceling free speech. Now, I wish it was, which is why I think it's important to take these very large tech companies and regulate them like public forums.
Agreed.
They will not have the ability to censor anybody or deplatform anybody. So, on one hand, I'm glad that after his Twitter ban, misinformation went down by 73%. I'm happy about that. But how we get there is more important. I would much rather have us get there because we have an educated populace that knows how to filter in what they receive and know the good from the bad, than simply having somebody just decide, I don't like this, I'm going to cancel it. So, for instance, there was a lot of talk during the boycotting Israel movement. And some people were saying, oh, it's anti-Semitic because you want to boycott Israel. And it had nothing to do with Judaism. It was all about they are fighting another country. They're doing what some people consider illegal land grabs. And we're going to take money away from them, especially U.S. dollars, and see if that affects their foreign policy in a positive way. There was no reason for anybody to do that because they hated Jews, but it became this big anti-free speech things, and a lot of people got shut down because they were for boycotting Israel.
Yep.
And I disagreed with that. I disagreed with Trump's ban. I disagreed with Alex Jones's ban.
Me too.
I don't like when people spread misinformation, but they are allowed to do that. I also think people are allowed to spread hate. I don't like that people do. And I don't want to see any of it in my feed, and you're not free from the consequences of spreading hate. Like, if you say you hate black people and then a black person punches you in the face, well, I'm going to applaud that black person. You know, you had it coming. You're a Klansman. I hope people beat you up.
Right, and I have my own take on this, and I'm a free speech absolutist, so that means that as long as you're not committing assault and threatening people with direct violence, you can say whatever you want. But here's the caveat. You also can get relentlessly torn apart if you say something stupid, and I believe you should be laughed at and ridiculed. So, like, what makes me mad is that people want to be able to say whatever they want, and they don't want to be made fun of if they say something stupid. No, and I'm for, like, everybody being able to say whatever they want so long as there's no violence. But don't get mad at me when I savage you for saying something dumb, dude. Because I'm not holding back, and I'm not gonna commit assault against you. But I will make you cry, you know. And I think that's important because that's the only way some of these people learn is that they spout their nonsense opinions, and the only way they ever really get out of their nonsense opinions is if they get out of their echo chamber and they get savaged online.
Well, that's one thing too, because it goes into this cancel culture debate. And it's you can say anything that you want to say as long as it's not immediately threatening somebody or inciting somebody else.
Right, and I agree with that
violence.
too, because that's Trump as well.
But you're not free from those consequences. So when people get fired because they espouse something racist or sexist, or people get like completely dragged on Twitter, like a lot of our senators, you can't come out and yell that mean tweets and canceling and stuff is squashing your right to say whatever you want. You can say it, but you're not free from those consequences. And I don't think this cancel culture is as big of a problem when it comes to people talking on Twitter or people talking on Facebook or you and me having an opinion, or even if I went to a college and I said, there's X amount of genders and people started yelling at me. I don't think any of that really matters. What the real important part is how these big platforms are canceling any form of discord, whether it be right or left, and they just don't want to have any of it on there.
Right.
So even if you want to say something true, if it's controversial, or even if it's not controversial, it's just news and it's upsetting, you will get demonetized, you will get deplatformed, and I think that Bernie's idea of regulating these like public forums are what we need now more than ever. And it's really weird to me that right-wingers come out and they talk about how crazy Bernie is and he's socialist and he wants to take your freedom away, but things like his plan would ensure more freedom, would make it to where you cannot be canceled. So it's like, can you please stop just seeing something as face value and taking all these labels and actually look at the plans? And I think with how big Facebook is, how big Twitter is, how big YouTube is, it's time to change regulations. They shouldn't be allowed to deplatform people because then your word reaching anybody is almost impossible.
Yep. And they're defenders of the Constitution. This is the First Amendment. They love the Second Amendment. You can't love the Second Amendment without loving the first one. So, yeah. The last thing I'd like to point out just very briefly is that the way that I treat people on this show and talking in person is different than I will treat them on social media. And that's going to be key because I know eventually people are going to call me out where I will go after some people on Twitter and Facebook a lot, hard, very, not mean-spirited, but I don't hold back on them.
I'll be mean.
And on this show, I am going to always try to maintain my patience with everybody and talk with a level head. So don't hold it against me if I'm going to break a couple of rules in terms of going after Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi on Twitter. They don't really apply. So, call me a hypocrite if you want to.
Well, they're lizard people anyway.
Exactly right. So they don't have any emotions. They're sociopaths. And they can't feel bad about anything.
They're literally bags of dust with Google eyes.
For real.
And people just puppet them.
Yeah, for real. That's Mitch McConnell for sure has to be a puppet. We're going to talk Boogaloo Boys next. I know there's no segue for that. But I want to talk about, we've done some research over the last couple of weeks since Jimmy Dore had his Boogaloo Boy on. And I want to talk about their ideology and their organization, their leadership, stuff like that. So I've done my research here. I'll kind of walk with this one. The ideology of the Boogaloo is more or less a lot of people that are trying to maintain their gun rights. And there is a lot of different ideas floating around on what exactly they want to do. Now, the Boogaloo movement is based off of a bad movie where at the end of said movie there is a race war. And
that's debatable.
A civil war.
Because some people say, yes, that is how it started. But on the other hand, it's also some claim that it started as a meme.
Yeah,
so
right,
it's like their actual origins of racist or not racist are even up in the air.
And that's indicative of the whole movement, really. Is there's a lot of different sects, and they don't really have a cohesive ideology.
Correct. Or a central leader.
Right, exactly. So there are a bunch of them because they are generally libertarians who want a lot of gun rights and who want to take care of their communities and are afraid of oppressive forces in their government. They generally tend to lean a little bit more right culturally, yes. But really they're kind of straight down the middle libertarians, and the vast majority of them actually do have a lot of leftist ideology. So they're really a kind of a mixed bag,
Yep.
and there is like, a small amount of them that are like neo-Nazis and stuff like that. They naturally have that. They attract that kind of people because those people naturally are for guns and stuff like
what
that.
I said to a friend of mine who is very conservative, and he asked me what percentage of racist people I think is in the U.S., and we had a long talk. And so what I said to him, and I mean this wholeheartedly, not all right-wingers are neo-Nazis or white nationalists. But all neo-Nazis and white nationalists are right-wingers.
Exactly.
I'm never going to walk in...
That's important.
I'm
Remember
never going
that.
to walk in somewhere and there's going to be a neo-Nazi or a white nationalist going about how they're voting blue this time. It's not going to happen. And so, of course, with any group that leans towards a particular political spectrum, you're going to pick up those people along the way.
Right.
But I think that we would be doing a disservice to anybody if we decided to give into fear-mongering like Fox News does. And so you had people come out espousing how Antifa is going to come for you and how they're going to burn the city down if you don't vote a certain way. And I feel like left-wing media is doing a lot of that with the Boogaloos.
They are.
It's fear-mongering. And don't get me wrong or twisted. I think any group, whether it be Antifa or BLM or Boogaloo Boys or Proud Boys or anything where there is this fanatical faith in your ideology, I think that's dangerous. I think that if you do join any groups, you should take a look at all the members, you should take a look at their ideology, you should see if you really want to be a part of that, if that's what you need to be a part of to spread your belief. But I think anything that allows you to act without thinking is dangerous. And so I just want to put that out there. With that being said, I might make a lot of people mad. I don't think the Boogaloo Boys are inherently a white nationalist or neo-Nazi group. I don't think the majority of them are racist. I think they might be a little extreme. I think they are definitely scared. I definitely think that they want a civil war more than they say they do. They say they're preparing for it, but of course everybody has those daydreams of like at the end of the world, I'm going to be the badass saving everybody. I think a lot of them kind of want it that way.
So I want to bring up what Jimmy Dore did, and I think this has been misconstrued badly on purpose by the neoliberals, is they have gone after Jimmy as if he's a Boogaloo Boy simply because he interviewed one. And what they're missing the entire point. And Jimmy,
God, Robert, did he wear a Hawaiian shirt on his vacation in 2002?
Jimmy
He's
Dore,
a Boogaloo Boy.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore looks good in Hawaiian shirts too.
I don't think he looks good at all. I think he's... I mean, maybe that's just because I'm not attracted to middle-aged white guys.
Yeah,
but,
right.
I could, to each his own.
But I think what Jimmy was trying to do, and was largely missed, was he was trying to make the point that, like, we can talk to individuals that label themselves something and find out that we actually have a lot in common with them if we just forget about that label, that demonization of them. And we need to start doing that again, where we start having conversations with people before and we stop ignoring them simply because we have them labeled before we've ever met them.
Exactly.
And so, am I going to disagree with 30% or 20% of the ideology of the Boogaloos, of those people? Yeah, but then there's 70% that I'll probably find a lot of common ground with that aren't in it for any type of racial issues. So I like to take everybody from all groups. I like to meet them individually. I don't like labels at all. And I really think that we need to fight the class war before the culture war.
Exactly.
And that's what Jimmy wants us to do. I think he would rather us unite with people like the Boogaloos than unite with people like centrist liberals who are not really interested in changing the status quo, even though ideologically we might be a little bit more with them culturally.
Right. There's a good point, and that brings up something, another conversation I had, and somebody asked me, why do I clump all right-wingers together? And I don't clump all people to the left together, and I simply said Trumpists or centrist Republicans or any of those, or conservative libertarians, all that, they typically have very similar ideas when it comes to policy. But if you go to the left, the further left you go, the different policies come into play. And so I want to fight for certain policies. I don't care what you label yourself, but right-wingers tend to be different. They tend to have very similar policies, deregulation, yada, yada, yada. I want my guns, that's fine. And so I feel that that is very similar when it comes to all these groups. So if you look at the actual ideology of somebody in Antifa and somebody in Boogaloo, you would see that they're very similar. They both want very little government influence. They both are tired of tyrannical, oppressive governments and the police state. They both want as much freedom as possible, decriminalizing drugs, letting people have guns, and that kind of thing. They both have a strong sense of community and looking out for each other. And then, BLM shares similar things. They want to end police brutality. They want, they want colored people, or people of color. I don't know which one's racist, and I apologize. They want people of color to be seen, through the same eyes as a white person. And if you look at all these groups, they all are very similar. And if you just put them on paper without any labels, it'd be hard to kind of choose between some of them. And so it's okay if somebody disagrees with you 20 or 30% of the time. You can talk about those later. But why don't you deal with what you are together with first?
And I think the class war is more of a danger than the culture war.
Well, it's why we're
mainstream media wants you to think the culture war is the most dangerous thing in America. That's something they're perpetuating. They're trying to keep us divided. I don't think the culture war... I mean, I'm not poo-pooing white nationalistic terrorists' acts, like the bomb that went off on Christmas Day, and I don't want to get into that, but I'm not downplaying those. But at the same time, I think the class war right now is, we have far greater wealth inequality than Rome ever did, and what happened there. So right now, I think the most pressing matter is the class war over the culture war. We'll fight the culture war second, and that's what Jimmy Dore thinks. I happen to agree. And that doesn't mean we are going to just, gain allegiance with the neo-Nazis. And in fact, most of those people, if you have any type of ideology like that, go fuck yourself. I don't want to talk to you. But there are reasonable people in some of these, like the Boogaloo movement and other ones that have been more or less demonized and lumped in with neo-Nazis, and I think those people are at least worth talking to.
Right, yeah. If you ever think one race is entirely superior to another, get bent. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, no other thing you could come up and tell me is going to make me want to team up with you. That's just not how it's going to be. But like I said, I think a lot of this fear-mongering about the Boogaloos is kind of very similar to what right-wing media did to Antifa. And it's like a mirror. And when I see it, I realize, like, oh man, I've been perpetuating this too. Because for a long time, until I really dived into it, did my research, I thought the Boogaloos and the Proud Boys were the same thing.
Right, and if you were to sit down with a lot of Boogaloos and actually really talk to them, I bet you could convince them that Antifa actually is more to their nature than Boogaloo ideology. Because in the end, a lot of these people are just youngsters that need some brotherhood, some camaraderie. So they latch on to the first time they feel that, and they say, to hell with the ideology, I'll deal with that later. I just like the fact that I'm being accepted by people. So if you were to get some of these people and actually break them down and ask them, what they believe morally, you'd find out that they actually believe more with like something like Antifa or leftist stuff, that Boogaloos are just the ones that got their hooks in them first. So if you were to actually sit down and have a conversation, you'd find out that they really ideologically aren't even what they say they are. They just mislabeled themselves.
It's also very hard when there's no central cohesion. So, for instance, the CIA and the FBI took out a lot of young Black Panther leaders because they were scared of what they thought was what they called the Black Messiah. Because they knew that there was a lot of power behind the voices of the people, and they couldn't risk it becoming a cohesive unit led by a central voice. And if you look up, there were arrests that shouldn't have been made, there were raids that shouldn't have been carried out, there were people killed in their bed, sleeping, guess what, still going on. Mm-hmm. And so when you have movements like BLM or Antifa where there isn't a strong, cohesive central unit, it's easy to demonize and it's easy to vilify. And just like the Boogaloos, you have to be careful who starts different things. So for instance, there's different charters. And if one person starts a charter and they are looking for those extremists, those people that are needing someplace to call home that would be easily swayed to be doing something like kidnap a governor or plant pipe bombs or are more white nationalists instead of wanting to lean them away, that's when you have dangers, when you don't have this central cohesion. But the good thing about not having that is you can actually look at the people in the movement, and instead of thinking they're all one thing, you can see them as individuals, and I think that's very important.
Yeah, and a lot of the Boogaloos, they would not be. I'm confident they would be elsewhere had the Boogaloo Brotherhood not just made friends with them early when they needed it psychologically. Right. So yeah, I mean, yeah, but if you're neo-Nazi ideology, get fucked. Just so we're clear, YouTube, please don't demonetize me or ban me for talking about neo-Nazis. Anyway, we're going to talk about Wall Street, and we talked a little bit about GameStop last time. There's not much going on as far as the squeeze. A lot of GameStop stock dropped about 72%. Yep. So it looks like a lot of people are abandoning ship there. AMC has done better. And I think that's because AMC, a lot of people are realizing that that's actually a good investment. GameStop is in a dead niche. It's
right, but let's also be clear that GameStop got a new CEO.
Right.
And their new CEO is far more apt to wanting to get with the times.
True.
Doing online games, that kind of thing. The old CEO, which is one of the reasons why the company was tanking, was because he was set in his old ways and he really didn't care too much. And so I think to the people who have GameStop stock, if you do hold on to it and it does have the capital, it could kind of be reborn. I don't know for sure. But I also know that if you bought 8 stocks at $7 and you lose a little bit of money, no one's going to care. And I saw this article and it said, millennials don't care if they lose money. This isn't a trend that's going to stop. And you're damn right.
Like, exactly right. And I would implore people to keep doing this simply for the reason that it's really making rich people sweat.
Or the laws. Do it for the laws.
Yeah, it's hilarious. Yeah, you lose a little bit of money, but you make billionaires sweat like crazy. I've never heard of a better investment. I'll sign up for anything. So, but I do think that there has been a little bit of buyer's remorse on GameStop because I think that people do realize, and a lot of people don't know that they have a new CEO. A lot of people did this just like off the cuff. They don't know that. But they're seeing that there's not really a future for GameStop. I think that's part of the reason that they dropped so much. AMC, on the other hand, I think people will go, yeah, they're going to survive. They're down because of COVID, not because their niche is dead.
Right, and so how many people are super excited to go see a movie again? I cannot
exactly
wait till
right.
COVID's over.
So I think I think a lot of people will sell their GameStop stock and then reinvest in things like AMC. I don't know if BlackBerry has a chance at ever coming back, but Nokia, why not? I don't know. That's not something that I think went down because of COVID. I think that possibility that they need to upgrade because they make mostly phones and cameras.
Well, let's be honest. We all need a completely Nokia indestructible smartphone.
That would be cool.
I want to take my smartphone and be able to whip it at a brick wall as hard as I can and have the bricks crack. And I think if Nokia came out and was like, hey, here's a smartphone we made, you can use it as a bulletproof vest. I'd be like, yeah, that's
perfect.
The Nokia I remember.
And some of those, that will happen. A lot of these are still going to go under. But keep trying, guys. This is a good way to do guerrilla politics. I'd like to talk about Nancy Pelosi and recently buying $1 million worth of Tesla stock. I think it was $600 to $1 million, depending on what the closing stock prices were.
Right.
So just briefly here, Nancy Pelosi bought this Tesla stock, and she is now currently negotiating with people like the Biden administration on the new electric vehicle clause of his Green New Deal.
Right.
So,
and whose fleet cars are we going to have in the government?
I wonder. And I have a sneaky suspicion that Tesla stock is going to go up a little bit here in the next couple of weeks because Nancy Pelosi is essentially doing what Martha Stewart did. Kelly Loeffler, after she had her COVID briefing, selling a whole bunch of stock and buying it in a company that produced body bags. That was nice of her.
No wonder they wanted everyone to go back to work.
Exactly, exactly right. They make some money off of it. So my question to you is should politicians be able to own stock, and if so, how?
Absolutely not. I'm actually a little extreme on this. I think if you're a politician and you work for government, you can only live in government housing, And I'm not saying, like, go live in the projects, although I would enjoy watching some senators live
That'd
in the
be
projects
hilarious.
so they can see what
Hillary
it's
Clinton.
like. But they should only be allowed to live in approved government housing. They should only be allowed to drive approved government cars. They should only be able to survive on the money they are paid for doing their job. They should not be able to own a business. They should not be able to buy stock. And if they do something like write a book or whatever and sell that, then sure, they can get that money. But I think if there's any door at all that opens up even an iota of corruption, it needs to be closed.
Right, and these are obvious conflicts of interest.
I also think that goes to their husbands. I read a story and they were like, well, technically, Nancy Pelosi didn't buy all the stock, her husband, but they're married.
Right.
So when he makes money, she makes
Bad
money.
argument.
Just like when Trump says, well, I put my business in a blind trust with my kids. Wow.
Right,
Good
or if Kamala Harris's husband Doug Emhoff, I think it's Erhoff or Enhoff, he's a billionaire. If she does legislation that benefits anything he's doing right now that makes him money, again, still conflict of interest, obviously.
Yeah, if you should have to get rid of your business.
I agree,
your stocks,
and I think you should actually have to. I would be okay with if they would just force you to put all of your stock into a blind trust. But even then, I believe that can be corrupted. There are ways around it. These people are so powerful that you know that they just know somebody that's going to be able to, like, they're not really going to have a true blind trust. Right. So in the ideal world, the unattainable ideal world, I would love it if they had no stock. You cannot own stock, and you have to sell all of your stock, just like Jimmy Carter had to sell his peanut farm.
Exactly. And I don't know why they thought, or anybody thinks, that this is not just a complete misuse of power. That they can own any stock and then change policies and people think, oh, that's just good business. Who honestly believes any politician at all, at any level? I don't even want a city councilman owning stock, to be honest with you.
Right, I mean, and if Nancy Pelosi, if she bought $1 million worth of Tesla stock, and Tesla stock, goes up even a fraction, she's making, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and she's making sure that happens because it looks like Joe Biden is going to give a bunch of government contracts to Tesla for his electric vehicle clause in the Green New Deal, or he's calling it the Green New Deal. It's bogus. It's Joe Biden's Green New Deal, which is like 20% at best of what Bernie wanted to do.
Yeah, let's all just take a moment to understand that the world we're going to bring our kids up in is going to be a dying one. There's no reversing it. We're
too far gone, I think.
We're too far gone. Yeah. We're starting too late. We'd have to get zero emissions by next year. Maybe.
Yeah, well, yeah, if we're correct. I mean, and it depends on what study you look at, but we're in the next couple of years, 5 years, 10 years at best.
FYI to anybody listening, you can buy seeds from endangered plants and plant them in areas, and it will be illegal to tear them up. So if you buy endangered trees and you plant them in places, the city cannot tear up the endangered trees. Plant them on lawns of people you hate. Things like that. And so put them in cracks.
The eco-socialist in me loves that idea so much. A little bit of the Tyler Durden in me as well.
Right, yeah.
And I want to talk real quickly about Janet Yellen, since we're talking about Wall Street corruption. So Janet Yellen is the Secretary of Treasury under Biden, and the big thing with her is recently in the news, she is having to basically decide what to do with Citadel and what they did with all their stock manipulation and market manipulation. And a lot of people want some people prosecuted, basically. Yeah. But Janet Yellen has an enormous conflict of interest because she took $810,000 worth of speaking fees for, I believe, one speech to Citadel. So she has an enormous conflict of interest here. And again, this just goes to show our point. She should never have been able to... First of all, it's ridiculous to pay someone $810,000 for any type of speech.
Yeah, that's
overly
bribery in your face.
Right, exactly. And second of all, certainly she should not be in a position of power where she's the fox guarding the henhouse right now because all of her friends work at Citadel. So you're telling me that she took $1 million for one speaking fee and now she's going to prosecute people on Citadel? No, it's never going to happen. So I want to get your quick take on this.
Yeah, so the thing is, this came to light actually thanks to Donald Trump and him bringing up a lot of the corruption that Hillary was engaged in during his 2016 election. Now, Trump engaged in just as much, if not more. But if there are a lot of things that came out of the Trump presidency in a positive way, it's that now the corruption's in everybody's face. Everybody is looking for it. You know, no one side thinks their side is squeaky clean. I want it to go a little further, and everybody look at their own side and start just hating it with like this immense loathing, just like passion. But until we get to that point, I think a lot of people have been engaging in this behavior for a long time, and it's also when people leave office, just like when you leave a company and you get an exit bonus, then you work for a cabinet, and then once you leave that cabinet, you go back to working at that company or giving speeches.
Or the other way around.
Exactly. And so it's been there for a long time, and it's open corruption, and they say there's no quid pro quo. They didn't say, do this, and I'll give you... Has anybody here, before marijuana was legal, ever talked to a drug... Did you ever go up to somebody and say, hey, let me buy some weed from you for this exact amount of money so I can put it... No,
there's no quid pro quo ever.
And so it's just they make these laws and these loopholes so vague and so big that people can squeeze through, and then when everybody cries for something to get done, nothing happens. Which is also one reason why it's so hard to actually get anybody arrested when everybody wants them arrested, because the other people can squeeze through the loopholes that the other corrupt people put in place. And like, well, we can't close it, because if we close it, we can't do it.
Exactly right. This also kind of frames how Bernie is worth 1/100th of Nancy Pelosi or Mitch McConnell. It's that along the way, he's just like, no, I'm not taking any of your legalized bribes. I don't want your speaking fees. I don't want to invest any of my stocks in things that I know are going to go up or down depending on my legislation.
Right.
And it goes to show you, like, they've had, like, Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden, and Bernie have all been in office the exact amount of time, pretty much. Nancy Pelosi's worth $140 million. Biden's worth, I think, $40 million. I don't know how much Mitch McConnell is, but it wouldn't surprise me. He's, what, a billionaire by now with all the legalized bribes that mother... You know what I'm saying, is taking. But Bernie, he's worth like what? I think a couple mil.
Yeah.
And he wrote a best-selling book, and that's the reason. There's a reason why Bernie is worth 2%, 3% of what some of these people are worth.
I remember during the last election cycle when he was running, and they came out and they were like, "Oh no, he does take super PAC money, but his super PAC was from different committees that raise money."
They'll say that he has a PAC and it's a Sunrise Movement. It's like,
right.
Okay.
Yeah, and so they use that word PAC. Well, where did the money come from? There's a difference between PAC money and PAC money.
Right.
And I don't think Bernie had any dark money in his campaign. And that's way different. If he has a PAC, but the whole PAC is just like, a nurses union or whatever
exactly.
have you, it's okay. But then you have another PAC and it's industry and it's
and
oil.
I love that the argument is always like, Bernie with the debate against Biden was like, you have all these super PACs, and the best Biden can do is he can't even say no, I don't. He just goes, well, then you also do too. Like, he can't even defend himself. It's just immediately, well, we're both dirty. Like, you're dirty. Well, yeah, you're right, but you're also dirty. Like, that's such a stupid... Oh, my God. And it's not even true because, of course, Joe Biden took so much more money via super PACs and PACs and from billionaires than Bernie did. So, again, it's just like... He's just dragging Bernie into the mud with him on arguments like that.
And it's also...
It's so annoying.
I think a lot of people are happy to this return to normalcy, which I absolutely hate. I don't want to go back to normal. Right. It's like... Yay, hooray, Biden stopped the XL pipeline, but he opened up like 30 new drilling contracts.
Right, and he could have stopped it, if he wanted to, he probably could have gotten Barack Obama to do it back when he was VP, and he just didn't do it.
Oil is worth almost nothing right now. So why are you doing it? U.S. shale's super low. You had Russia and Saudi Arabia for a while selling barrels at negative money.
Jeez, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's why it crashed during COVID when Trump was in office.
Jeez.
U.S. shale was so cheap that the Saudis in Russia were like, you need to stop selling your oil so cheap so we can compete. And even Trump's economic advisors told these companies, yeah, you got to raise your prices. And the company's like, nah, we're going to make all the money because people are only buying oil from us. And so Russia and Saudi were like, okay, see how you like this, and tanked their own oil prices.
Now's the time for the Green New Deal, the actual Green New Deal, man.
And so people are running around saying, like, well, look at all the jobs it'll create. But it's not going to help our economy. It's not going to lower gas prices. You can't get them any lower because oil is basically worthless right now. And so a lot of people give AOC flack because they talk about her Green New Deal and how ridiculous it is, but none of them have read it. But there's a clause in there that I really like, and that it gives job security. Like, it will pay oil and coal workers their entirety of their wages for 5 years, and it will pay for new training into a green field. And people are like, well, what about the jobs? If somebody said, hey, quit your job, I will give you your entire wage for 5 years and pay you to go to school, I would quit in a heartbeat.
Also, if you decide to retire, you get an enormous pension with that Green New Deal as well. So if you decide not to do training and you just want to retire, you get, depending on how long you've been in it, I think, but you get an enormous pension according to that Green New Deal.
And has anybody talked to anybody that's worked on an oil rig?
They probably hate it.
Do you know how hard that job is?
Yeah, it's terrible.
I know people that work on oil
so
rigs.
It should be done. It's right now. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole too much on the Green New Deal. We will do a whole show on the Green New Deal. But
yeah, opening up new oil, it's just because these companies are giving him money. And what I imagine is going to happen is it's going to be similar to what they do with diamonds. They're going to get all the oil. They're going to stockpile it as long as they can stockpile it, because oil isn't, you can't hold it forever once it's out of the ground. And then they'll jack up prices artificially, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
Drilling right now, it's not going to give them much. So I don't know.
No, we'll see. He's in the pockets of the oil industry. It's a dead industry. It will be dead regardless of Joe Biden within 10 years anyway. It's just a question of whether or not we do it quickly enough to actually impact climate change and help ourselves.
Without policies, it's still going to happen because industry progressively moves. And so what people are realizing is solar for your house is cheap until energy companies jack up rates like they did in New Mexico and Nevada. But solar's cheap. Wind is cheap. Tidal's
not
cheap.
As cheap, but it's still cheap.
It's green. People like it. Electric cars are cool and fast, and people think they're high-tech, and it's fun. And so the market's moving there anyway. So
it is evidenced by Nancy Pelosi, I guess, coming full circle, going to Tesla. Like, it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, Ford's coming out with
we're going to use our capitalism to make sure Elon Musk gets very, very rich while we transfer to electric vehicles. Yeah. That's how we're going to go.
And can we also talk about, just go back real quick, I don't want to spend too much time on it, but capitalism is the reason why people are getting canceled. It's not because these companies are principled. It's because they want to look good from a PR standpoint. So they're canceling anybody that seems like they're going to cause a ruckus and they're going to make people angry and leave the platform. So if you're mad about your freedom of speech being canceled, but you're just like, capitalism's the way to go. Capitalism is why Trump got canceled. Capitalism is why they're shutting down right-wingers and left-wingers. It has nothing to do with a principled position. It has nothing to do with wanting to suppress your voice. They don't care. They're all about the money. Capitalism is why it is happening.
Yeah, as a rule. I wish I had a T-shirt with that on it. For whatever your problem is, that's it. Capitalism is why it's happening.
So they caused my erectile dysfunction. Damn.
Yes. Me being born with 3 testicles. It's capitalism.
Damn.
It actually is. Anyway.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Right. I don't want to do that. Let's have that conversation a different day. We're going to talk about COVID stimulus passing yesterday in the Senate. The bill did pass the $1,400, and that is wonderful. But why not $2,000? And
because
also,
fuck us, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, that's the main problem, and I don't want to spend too much time on that, because I think in our heart of hearts we knew that they weren't going to do 2,000. We were trying to pressure them, but Joe Biden sucks. It was lost weeks ago. But what I do want to talk about is the means testing that they're trying to do, which is doing 2 different things which are very bad. One is wasting a whole lot of time. Now, means testing means that the bill, they're testing for, they don't want to give people over a certain income per household the stimulus checks to try to save money, and that's the way they frame it. But what they're really doing is it wastes a lot of time, which they're trying to drag their feet now, so that's an accomplishment for them. And the other thing is that it makes them look frugal, but it's not really. Because, like, you know, I'm definitely for rich people getting stimulus if we can all get it right now and have it be universal.
Yeah, let's, if I'm not mistaken, this was and I'm using air quotes, bipartisan thing. The Republicans were pushing more for means testing than the Democrats. Now, granted, it doesn't really matter too much. The Republicans, it's all about optics. They don't really care. But what I say is, do rich people pay taxes? Most of them. So give them their money back. I don't care. They're already making millions more than me. Give them two.
It's a drop in the bucket. So again, that brings me back. It's just I think a sandbagging tactic where they're just trying to drag it out as long as they can under the guise of austerity, which is frustrating. And that's all I really wanted to say about that. I think that if we wanted to get 2,000, Joe Biden could have dragged Joe Manchin on social media and just basically threatened his job. Like, I'm going to campaign against you. You're going to lose your job if you don't get out of the way. But it's lost. Joe Biden's never going to do that. But if we wanted 2K stimulus checks, we could have gotten it via budget reconciliation and making sure Joe Manchin votes correct.
And let's take a moment to remember that when the COVID hit and the economy tanked the first day and stock markets were plummeting.
Great point, yep.
They pumped $2 trillion, I think?
It was almost $4 trillion over the next week, but you're right, $2 trillion in 2 days.
Yes, and it was gone.
Gone, yep.
It was gone.
And that's literally the Federal Reserve printing money and injecting it right into the stock market.
We have gotten off the gold standard years ago, which means our money is completely worthless except for the faith that we give it.
Exactly.
And so, all this talk about inflation, yada, 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 the fact of the matter is, if the government cared about you, they could print off enough money to give every single American $1 million. Right now.
Yeah.
And $300 million... That's not even that's like a fraction of our military budget. That's not even, it's
right.
It's
and we can print money, like, you know, we'll talk about modern monetary theory pretty soon on a show. I don't understand it. It is pretty esoteric, but it is fun to talk about because it does throw out a lot of the old ideology that people are basing austerity off of. It trashes it. And you don't even need to, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole on this, but you don't even actually need to print money to give us money. All you need to do is tax the billionaires. But if we wanted to, we can print money because we have our own sovereign currency and we have confidence in our currency that we could and just give it to the people.
Yeah.
That's that simple.
And on top of that, inflation is a difficult concept to kind of wrap your head around if you're going way into detail about it. But it basically just means that your dollar isn't worth $1 anymore because the worth of it is less because there's more in the market. So there were stories about when certain African countries had to deal with their elections, and there was a lot of fraud and that kind of thing, and their economies tanked. There were people walking around with giant stacks of bills to just go buy groceries. And it was ridiculous because the money was worth almost next to nothing, but the fact of the matter is the American market is still very strong. And so even if you did pump massive amounts of money into our economy, inflation would be minimal.
Right.
And even if you didn't do that, even if you just looked at it as give us our taxes back, it blows my mind that they're fighting over, well, should we give people this amount of money? I don't know if they deserve it. I don't know if we should give them $1,400 or $1,200, but then these companies need bailouts, and they're just like, oh, yeah, we'll just give it. No problem.
Trillions.
And it's just like...
They put $2 trillion in those first 2 days. That's more than Joe Biden's big stimulus bill that is about to pass.
So why are you arguing if we deserve our own money? You're rich because of us. It's not the other way around. I'm not rich because of Wall Street. Wall Street's rich because of my bailouts after 2008 and after like 6 months ago and all the other crashes that we millennials have lived through. If it wasn't for tax money propping them up, they would be probably worth less than we are. But we keep giving them money because we have no choice. The government just takes it and funnels it somewhere else. But when it comes to us getting our money, we have to fight like hell to get $1,400, which is insulting.
Yeah, even 2,000 is insulting. I tweeted today. I was like, dude, if you owe the mob $2,000 and you show up with $1,400, they'll just break your thumbs and then tell you to come back with the extra $600 next week.
Yeah,
like
if they're nice,
right?
Depending on how
that's
long
how we got to be
it
with our politicians. Metaphorically on social media, breaking their thumbs. Last thing here, I want to talk about Oregon decriminalizing all drugs. This is some good news. That's why we're ending with it. We got about 5 minutes here. And this happened via direct ballot initiative, which is wonderful. And that's what I really want to talk about here. So what happened in Oregon, and this law went into effect, beginning of February, is that now you cannot be arrested for having small amounts of any kind of drug on you. The most that can happen to you is you get a $100 fine. And you can avoid the fine if you go see a therapist, is the other thing, and an addiction counselor.
Your average raver is totally safe.
And this is wonderful. This is all drugs. It's a huge step in the right direction. And for the people like me who believe a lot of these things are going to be done on a state-by-state basis rather than federally, this is cool because it sets a nice precedent. And just like marijuana, once the first domino falls, a lot of dominoes start to fall afterwards. So let's get your take on it. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, so I think I've been wanting to decriminalize all drugs for a long time. It's happened in a lot of other countries around the world, and it has tremendous benefits. Oftentimes it takes the taxes. Now, this is different than legalizing it, but when they legalize it, they take the taxes off those drugs, and they usually use it to make more therapies available or rehabs available. Now, I know people that, because we live in a state that has, and a city that have high heroin addicts, meth addicts, that kind of thing. And I know people that wanted to go to rehab, and the only free rehabs had waits 3 weeks long. Well, by the time that wait hits, you might not have the drive to get clean. And so when you stop treating addicts like criminals, all the studies show that addict, behavior, drug use, it all drops.
Yeah, addiction rates drop heavily.
And I think Oregon is on the right track, giving therapy. And before Oregon did this, there were cities where the sheriff said, we're just not going to arrest people, we're going to give them therapy instead.
Right.
And it worked great there.
It works great in Europe, and what they do is they actually have addiction centers, what they call them, where not only do you have access to a therapist, but you'll have your own room, a roof over your head, clean water, everything you need to live. They'll help you detox, and you actually, if you're like a heroin addict, they give you clean needles and clean heroin to detox you slowly so you don't die. So a lot of times they give you a place to stay, and they also help you get clean because they got a therapist, and they make sure you don't seize up and swallow your tongue from DTs.
Yeah, and even if you don't want to get clean, you're still allowed to go there and use and be safe.
Right, you don't get the AIDS drops and
Right.
bloodborne pathogens drop because you actually have clean needles.
Right. I would much rather have a heroin addict go somewhere and do it with people watching and observing and clean needles than a heroin addict do it on the street, and then he gets laid and then he passes AIDS on.
It's the same reason why we should legalize prostitution. You want to cut those things down, legalize prostitution, safer for the prostitutes, safer for everyone else. And when they did it, it was like, oh man, I don't want to quote this wrong. I think it was Australia or something like that. But they legalized brothels, and the divorce rate dropped 10% in a year, just like that. And I think it was even Jim Jeffries who was making a joke about it. That's why I say Australia. I don't know if that's it. Don't quote me there.
I love when women pretend to love me. I'm not rich, so it very rarely happens.
There we go.
But when it does, I love it.
But anyway, what they've done in Oregon is a great first step. I hope a lot of other states follow suit, and then next thing you know, we got all 50 states in a couple of years here all decriminalizing.
And I want to see legalizing. I want to see more than just decriminalization.
Right. But this is the first domino, guys. It's great news. And this brings me to my last point. We were talking about it off air last time you were over. Direct ballot initiatives. This was a direct ballot initiative, which means that the people got to vote directly on it rather than having to coerce a politician to get it done and pass a bill. And personally, I think that most of our laws can be done this way. And Kyle Kalinske often says that he thinks that at least the top handful, 5 or 10 issues that the country has should be brought up federally as direct ballot initiatives every election cycle.
Yep.
And I happen to agree with that. I wish we could do more like that, because even in Florida, a very red state, they voted direct ballot initiative a couple of weeks ago to raise the minimum wage as a state to $15. So that's Bernie's plan, more or less far left, what a lot of them would call socialist plan, and they voted for it via direct ballot initiative, but then they have politicians like Ron DeSantis who they vote for and put in office. So this would be a great way to circumvent all the really bad politicians.
Yeah, the way I see it is, just like we were talking about with Boogaloo and Antifa, get rid of the labels. If you get rid of the labels and you ask people questions about where they stand on certain policies, most people, right or left, agree on almost the exact same things. It's literally just what team they would rather have lie to them. And so when you do give the people the actual power, which is who should have it, because those are the people the laws affect, they almost always vote in a very similar way. And not only do I think that's important in this stage where everybody wants unity, instead of giving people a team to root for, you give them, a goal to achieve. They almost always want the same thing. They want the government out of their lives when they want certain freedoms, when they want to be able to do what they want to do, whether medically or recreationally. But they want government to, regulate Wall Street and make sure nobody's, taking money out of their pockets. But they also want to make enough money to live. It's like most people want the same things, and so direct ballot initiatives show that across the board. Americans, for the majority, feel a very similar way. And I think that direct ballot initiatives not only make it to where they're simple, they're concise, they don't add a whole bunch of stuff into these bills that make them impossible to pass, or give people mostly what they want but give huge kickbacks to companies. It's just a simple, do you want X done? If yes, yes. If
check
no,
the checkbox.
No.
Yep.
And it's faster, it gets rid of the corruption aspect, and I think a direct ballot initiative should be something that is way more common, and even more than just like once a year or twice a year.
We could do it. I would like to do it. Since we're doing midterms, every 2 years.
Yeah.
Why not? With every single election, let's do it. I'm all for that. The more we can do it, the better.
Yep. And I get that some things you don't want on the direct ballots because the American people might not be educated enough to make certain decisions, and that's totally fine. Or a bill might be very long, but certain things like, should we leave Iraq and Afghanistan? Yes.
Super easy.
Things like that.
Simple.
I'm totally for. And I think that most people agree with that.
Yep. I have to agree. Give us the chance, and we will vote, I think, 80% on a lot of that stuff when partisan politics are thrown aside.
Yeah, but they can't have that.
No, exactly. And that's why direct ballot initiatives are not a thing in America. It would be way too democratic. Anyway, we're a little over time here. I'm going to close up here. A couple of good news things very briefly. Kyle Rittenhouse skipped town with $2 million of bail that he got from crowdfunding, which is to me one of the most hilarious things ever. Now, he's probably not gone. He's in a safe house someplace. But nothing makes me laugh harder than like a whole bunch of people that are gun nuts bailing him out, and then him just like running away into the hills.
Right. I mean, me and you talked before the show, and honestly, with how our justice system is, I don't see him being brought to justice.
No, I don't either.
But it's just like it. I don't like seeing people get away with bad things, but it's just like I'm seeing him break the law when he was all about the law is just, to me, hilarious. Like, the irony of it, the hypocrisy
He's
of
such
it.
an obvious, like, right-wing hero with what happened to him. His whole story is so right-wing and crazy.
You can't
and
do
like
it, but I can.
hypocritical. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then last thing here, SpaceX's Starship exploded on the landing a couple of days ago. Elon Musk, immediately after finding out that Jeff Bezos was stepping down from CEO of Amazon and he would be alone as by far the richest person on the planet, his little toy exploded. So that is great news. It cost $216 million. So, I mean, he has to work at least like an hour and a half, I think, to
Jeff
make that amount of money.
Bezos stepped down from Amazon because he was actually on that rocket about to make it when it exploded, and they had to cover his tracks until they finished building the Bezos bot. And it's actually similar to what happened to Mark Zuckerberg.
dude, I could see Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg walking out of the fiery crash that is Starship, like the T-1000. T-1000 in Terminator. Just completely silver. He's like, put skin back on me. All right, that's all I've got for tonight, guys. It's thank you for tuning in. We're gonna go over some more stuff in a couple of days. I don't have anything written here. Anything in particular you want to go over next show?
With how the news cycle's going, I'm probably sure that we're going to find something to go over next show.
Yeah.
I definitely do want to get more into corruption that's just in our face happening all the time. And we could do an entire show based on that. And
we will. And one thing I want to do with you, and I mentioned this to you, is to do a political compass test for you and for me on air as separate episodes. I redid mine, and I am, in fact, an eco-socialist, but I'll go through that, and I'd like us to do both, and we'll do those next time, probably. Maybe 2 episodes from now where we'll each do our own.
Yep. I'm just going to be straight up like communist, just like you should be riding bears. I'm like,
there's 2 different kinds. We'll do the easier one for the sake of time. They're about a half hour, and then there's one that takes about an hour. We'll do the shorter one. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Keep fighting the good fight out there. We'll talk to you later.